All right, welcome back to the after sermon where we get to sit down with our communicator from the weekend and unpack the sermon on a deeper level. Doug Miller, thank you for being here.
Of course, buddy.
That's amazing. Appreciate it. The knee made it up the stairs.
It did.
So well done. That's
Thank
a win.
you. It's getting better.
Okay, so give me a little synopsis of the sermon today, and then I've got a couple questions.
Yeah. So basically, as we're in the middle of this next is now series where we're just really unpacking God's vision for the future, I think it's important for us every once in a while to be reminded that we're not the only ones that have ever faced challenges ahead of us and have been invited into what God is calling us to do. And sometimes those things can seem big and overwhelming. And I absolutely love the story of Gideon that we've been walking through. We'll finish it up next week. But the whole idea that God called a very normal person to be part of something really big. And there were things he needed to do. He had to obey. He wanted to hear from God, and then, walks in faith. And as we said in the service, he ends up in the hall of faith, not because he was qualified, not that because he thought he was able, but because he said yes.
Okay. So you talked about your moment in this church planting conference where you got some, maybe some bad news.
Mm-hmm.
Walk us through that feeling, and then what do we do when we have this clear sense from God, but then this conflicting voice?
Mm-hmm.
How do we navigate something like that?
Yeah, it's hard. I think the first thing we need to do is call it out. Like, this is what I'm feeling. This is my fear. This is my place of not understanding. And when we're overwhelmed, I think we're at a place where the most important thing that we can do is call that reality out, but call it out to the right person, and to really make sure that we're communicating what's going on the inside and our thoughts and our heart and all the things surrounding what oftentimes can feel so overwhelming to God, because he's not going to call us to something that, he's not capable of helping us with. We just have to sometimes get beyond ourselves and our own self-doubt.
So you mentioned Gideon.
Yep.
And him tearing down this idol.
Yeah.
That's part of his story. These idols can sometimes lay just underneath the surface. They're subtle. Mm-hmm. How do we go about identifying them in our lives?
Yeah. Well, I think the story of Gideon shows us some of how that happens. And as we hear from God, he's going to reveal those things to us. And that even can be overwhelming. If you go back to Judges chapter 6 and read the story of Gideon, he goes at night and tears the altar and the pole down. And obviously he does that under the cover of darkness because he's afraid of how people will respond to this. It's such a cool story. So I think in our lives, first of all, we need to be sensitive to the things. I think just asking the question, first of all, as a posture of our heart, God, are there things that have slowly crawled their way onto the throne of my life? And I think oftentimes you can tell by look at your calendar and you can look at your checkbook, really.
So true.
Because that is where we're spending our time, our effort, our energy, and our resource. And if there are things, and I guess also in some ways the things that provide for that can also be, there's lots of things that can crawl their way onto the throne of our life. But when we're trying to identify those things, just asking ourselves the question, what is it that I can sense and feel is becoming such a priority in my life that it's starting to push other things, very good and healthy things, out of the mix? And I love the quote from the book that I said from Tim Keller.
Oh, yeah.
That said oftentimes it's really good things that sneak their way into our lives and start to eke their way up to that top place of priority. And we just need to be sensitive to it because it can be very sneaky. That's the way it's been in my life.
Yeah, no, I think that's so true. Especially, I think even Eric talked about it last week when these good things, these things that aren't necessarily like sin or like bad red flag kind of things.
Yeah.
It's really just this slow creep of things becoming ultimate things.
Yeah.
Which is so interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So to kind of wrap this up, I've got one more question about discernment.
Okay.
So we talk about listening. Okay. We talk about trying to like put ourselves in these situations where we're creating, where we're taking risks in Jesus' name, and we're stepping out in faith. How could you help us kind of walk that line between like listening for wise counsel or or wise decisions, but also taking those risks with faith.
So for the way it's been for me and for Beth, my wife, is that it just starts with a decision to really set aside some specific times where we're going to pray over this decision. We're going to pray over the things that we're trying to figure out what to do. And hearing God's voice is not, it's not overwhelming. This is something that should be happening every day in our lives. And we talk about it a lot here at Plum Creek because it is so important. But starting to discern God's voice is like, it doesn't always align with everything that makes sense. Like sometimes things don't line up just perfect. Like go back to the church planting story. It did not make sense that we would pack our entire family up and come to Castle Rock. In retrospect, it makes great sense. But in the moment, it's a little bit scary. And so I think we all have to have a moment like I did at that hotel room where we're like, God, this is overwhelming. I'm not sure how this is going to work. But if I sense and know that that's your voice, then I'm going to move forward in it. And I would rather make an attempt at hearing God's voice and try and do what he said and have it land somewhere else than not try at all. And so if we're learning to hear his voice, we got to start practicing that. We got to start leaning into that. And this is a really interesting and fun way for us to do this while we're in this Next Is Now season, because we need Plum Creekers to hear from God.
Yeah.
And we need them to make decisions that don't always make sense on paper, but make sense because we've heard his voice. And then we lean in this together. Last night was awesome. I had this gentleman come up, he's like super emotional, just like me. And he's like, I couldn't be here next week. And he just gave me what he felt like the Lord was calling him to do in his first check to help like start heading in that direction. And it just touched me so deeply that like God is moving, God is speaking. And as we lean into this season, one of the reasons I love this season, not because I love to raise money and do all the things, but I love for our people to learn to hear the voice of God and to start experimenting with that, lean into it a little bit and trust him. And for Beth and I, it was also, let's get on agreement together. Right. Like we have to make this decision together. And so anyway, I just think it's a fun season, and hearing God's voice doesn't have to be scary or weird. You know, it needs to be a normal experience that happens all throughout our days.
Yeah, I find that so interesting, especially because, you know, sometimes it can either be scary or weird, or it can almost feel formulaic. And it's like, oh, well, if I do this, this, and this, then that must equal God's voice or whatever. But I really love that tone and heart you've put behind it. Like just try.
Have you ever played the game Taboo?
Yes.
Where your partner has to say all these different things to try and get you to understand the word or say the word.
Yes, many times.
I believe that's a lot like what hearing God's voice is like, except he knows you so well that he knows how to communicate to you. I love that. And so for me, I'm super emotional. So when I have something I feel is from God, but I feel it too, that's when I'm starting to pay attention, because God knows my language and he knows what connects with my heart and my soul. And so that's how I've experienced it. Yeah. So God's kind of playing a game of Taboo with all of us. We just need to be listening. And he'll communicate. He'll communicate because he cares so desperately for his people to hear his voice, because he loves us so much. I
love that. Well, thank you again for joining us. I really appreciate it. It's so good to talk to you and unpack that sermon a little bit more.
You bet.
Awesome. Okay, guys, you know the drill. If you want to hear the full message that this conversation was based on, you can head to our YouTube channel or listen wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to play the game of Taboo, you can buy it on Amazon.
See you guys.